Isaiah Thompson walked slowly down the fog-draped street of Crestwood, Virginia, his worn shoes scraping against the damp sidewalk, carrying a quiet joy as he thought of the gift he was about to buy for his late wife, Evelyn. But that joy, he knew, might be interrupted the moment he stepped into his destination, Hamilton & Sons, the town's most luxurious jewelry store. He wasn't a frequent visitor to such places, and when he'd once accidentally dropped a ring in the past, the staff's suspicion had turned into baseless accusations. Just minutes later, he'd faced scrutinizing stares, but today, he hoped it would be different. He had a powerful ally, his son Nathan, and he believed the young man could change everything in a way no one expected. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. It was a cold winter morning in Crestwood, a peaceful suburban town, where life seemed to move at a leisurely pace. Families strolled through the park, kids bundled in coats instead of running around, and neighbors exchanged polite greetings as they headed to the farmer's market at the end of the street. Pale light pierced through the thick fog, casting a hazy glow over everything, making Crestwood look like a still painting. But for Isaiah, a 68-year-old black man, today wasn't just a chance to enjoy that beauty. He had a single purpose in mind: to buy the perfect pearl necklace to honor Evelyn, who had left him nearly 10 years ago. Isaiah had saved for months for this gift, picking up odd hours at a friend's woodshop after retiring from teaching high school, carefully setting aside every meager pension dollar. He'd found it, the pearl necklace at Hamilton & Sons, the town's fanciest spot. He'd often passed by, his aging eyes fixed on the display window, imagining how Evelyn would smile if she were alive to wear it. Today was the day he'd make that dream real. He gripped the wallet in his threadbare brown coat pocket, feeling the weight of the bills inside. Not just money, but a symbol of the love he held for her, of everything he wanted to give her, despite their life of hardships. As he stepped out of his small house at the end of Maple Street, the glass windows of Hamilton & Sons shimmered in his mind, glinting under the dim light of the cold morning, reflecting the quiet streets behind. He paused briefly, adjusting his worn coat, though it couldn't hide his simple appearance. Scuffed shoes, a slow gait from age. He knew how some people reacted when they saw an older black man like him enter places like this. He muttered to himself, voice raspy but firm, "Not today, just go in, buy the necklace, and leave." He'd felt those suspicious stares before, the silent heavy looks, from his younger days, when he'd tried buying gifts for Nathan, and been seen as someone who didn't belong. He shook his head, pushing the memory away, then took a deep breath, his exhale forming a white puff in the frigid air. He stepped up to the weathered wooden door of his home, locked it behind him, and headed toward the town center. Inside Hamilton & Sons, he pictured what awaited: gleaming glass cases, velvet-lined wooden shelves, and rows of pearls, gold and silver, sparkling under blinding lights, almost dazzling him whenever he thought of it. The scent of expensive perfume and polished wood drifted through his memory from the one time he'd stopped by, when customers, wealthy folks in fancy clothes, glanced at him with curious eyes. But he didn't care about them. He focused on the necklace he'd come to buy. He'd seen it through the glass, pristine white pearls, perfect like Evelyn's smile on their wedding day. Behind the old wooden counter in his home, Isaiah opened a drawer, pulling out the tin box holding his savings. He counted each bill, fingers trembling from the cold and age, eyes squinting to see clearly. He whispered to himself, "It's enough, Eve. I'll bring it home for you." It was a promise he made to himself, a way to keep Evelyn close even though she was gone. He'd heard neighbors gossip about Hamilton & Sons, a place where jewelry cost more than his yearly teacher's salary back in the day. But today, he wasn't there to prove anything to anyone but himself and Evelyn. The path to Hamilton & Sons stretched through Crestwood Park, where fog clung thick to benches and wilted grass, then past the farmer's market, now down to a few lonely stalls. A man behind a vegetable stand nodded at him, but Isaiah knew the gesture was habit, not warmth. He didn't mind. He was used to those invisible distances, the wary looks from neighbors as he passed, the whispers behind him when he entered the grocery store in his old coat. Crestwood might look peaceful, but Isaiah knew the cracks beneath, the boundaries people built with silence. Isaiah stood before the heavy glass door of Hamilton and Sons, hand trembling slightly as he touched the handle. He adjusted his coat again, though it couldn't hide who he was, the threadbare sweater, worn shoes, and the look of a man who'd lived through too many hard years. He muttered once more, "Just go in, buy the necklace, and leave." Isaiah Thompson pushed open the heavy glass door of Hamilton and Sons, a small bell chiming in the quiet space, announcing his presence. Inside, everything was as he'd imagined, no, more than that. Gleaming glass cases reflected light from crystal chandeliers overhead. Velvet-lined wooden shelves displayed rows of pearls, gold, and silver glinting under harsh white lights. A faint scent, a mix of costly perfume and polished wood, filled the air, making him feel like he'd stepped into another world, one not meant for him. The customers inside, mostly older women in cashmere sweaters and men in tailored suits, cast fleeting curious glances his way. Isaiah ignored them, his eyes locked on the pearl necklace he'd come to buy. He walked slowly down the narrow aisle between displays, his old shoes brushing lightly against the polished tile floor, each step echoing in the hushed space. Behind the counter stood Evelyn Harper, a white woman about 50, dyed blonde hair pulled tight, sharp eyes hidden behind thin-framed glasses. At first, her expression was neutral, almost blank, but when her gaze landed on Isaiah, something shifted. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her hand on the counter tightened slightly, and her eyes, once idle, now flashed with clear wariness. Isaiah felt it instantly, that shift, the unspoken but heavy question hanging in the air. "What are you doing here?" He'd seen that look 100 times, felt that suspicion cling to him, like an invisible chain. Whenever he entered places people thought he didn't belong, but he refused to let it stop him. Not today. He approached the counter, offering a polite smile, though his hands trembled faintly in his coat pockets. His voice was raspy but calm, the way he'd once taught students to stay steady on chaotic days. "I'd like to see that pearl necklace over there." He pointed to the piece in the display case, pristine white pearls, shimmering like Evelyn's smile in his memory. Evelyn didn't move. She crossed her arms, tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing as if sizing him up from head to toe. "Are you sure?" she asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm, as if he'd just said something absurd. "That's pretty expensive." Isaiah's stomach tightened, but he kept his face composed. He'd learned to control his emotions through years in the military, through countless moments of baseless suspicion. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his worn wallet, and opened it to reveal neatly folded bills, the money he'd saved for months. "I'm sure," he said firmly, his voice unwavering. "I've got the money right here." He placed his hand on the counter, letting her see the bills clearly, a statement that he wasn't there empty-handed. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the money, her lips curling slightly, but not in awe. It was a grimace, as if the sight of it offended her. Instead of softening, she grew tenser. Her fingers twitched near the phone on the counter, though she didn't pick it up yet. She let out a short, dry laugh, then asked, "And where'd you get that money from?" Her voice was light, but the accusation beneath cut like a blade. Isaiah stiffened. "Excuse me?" he asked, though he already knew where she was going. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, her gaze unwavering. "Just a lot of cash for someone like you," she said, her tone even but loaded. "You? I don't know. Borrow it from someone. Pick it up somewhere?" Her question wasn't curiosity. It was a veiled conviction dressed as interest. Isaiah's stomach twisted, but he took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. He hadn't done anything wrong. "I work at my friend's woodshop," he said, enunciating each word clearly, the way he'd once taught students to read history aloud. "I saved up for this." Evelyn made a small sound, half laugh, half snort, shaking her head slightly. She muttered, tapping her nails on the counter, the sound small but sharp like pinpricks. "And you expect me to believe that?" Isaiah swallowed the anger rising in his throat. "Yes," he replied curtly, his voice now a bit harder, though still controlled. Evelyn chuckled dryly, as if she'd just heard a bad joke. "Well, I guess I should feel honored you think you can fool me," she said, finally stepping toward the display case. "I've been here a long time, buddy. I know when something's off." Isaiah's hands clenched in his pockets, a tight unease spreading through him. He forced them to relax, taking a deep breath to stay steady. This was supposed to be simple. He hadn't come here to be humiliated. "I just want to see the necklace," he said, his voice thinning, patience wearing thin. Evelyn sighed, as if he were inconveniencing her, but finally pulled the velvet tray from the case and set it on the counter. "Be careful with it," she warned, her tone sharp as a knife. "It's worth more than you could make in a year." Isaiah clenched his jaw but said nothing, holding back the fury boiling inside. His trembling hands gently lifted the pearl necklace he'd dreamed of for months. The white pearls gleamed under the chandelier light, cool against his fingertips, a reminder of Evelyn's gentle smile in his memory. He turned it slightly, watching the pearls sway, imagining it around her neck on their wedding day. It was a rare peaceful moment amid the store's stifling air, a moment he wanted to hold onto forever. But as he tilted his hand to look closer, his once steady grip faltered with age. The necklace slipped from his fingers, hitting the glass counter with a sharp clink, then rolling onto the polished tile floor below, marking a fracture not just in the moment, but in his heart. Isaiah's breath caught in his throat. Before he could bend to pick it up, a piercing scream shattered the store's silence, slicing through like a razor. "Oh my God, I knew it!" Evelyn Harper shrieked, her voice echoing through the space, drawing every eye toward them. Isaiah's eyes widened in shock. "Wait," he started, but Evelyn gave him no chance. She pointed at him, her face twisted with anger and triumph, as if she'd just caught a dangerous criminal. "I knew what you were up to from the start. You were going to pocket it, weren't you? Thought you'd get away easy." Isaiah's stomach sank, as if the floor had dropped beneath him. "What? No, he stammered, trying to keep his voice steady, but Evelyn lunged for the phone on the counter, her fingers dialing so fast he couldn't react. "Call the police now," she yelled into the receiver, her voice cutting like a blade. "We've got a thief here, an older black man, old coat, just tried to steal from us." Isaiah froze, the weight of her words crashing down on him like a freight train. The room went still, but the air thickened with judgment. He felt the eyes of everyone in the store, the upscale customers who'd ignored him now staring with open suspicion. A woman in an expensive sweater clutched her purse tighter, as if afraid he'd lunge for it. An older man in a suit shook his head, as if this only confirmed what he'd always believed. Isaiah wanted to shout, to defend himself, but he knew full well, that no one in this room would believe him over Evelyn. Not when she'd labeled him, not when he was who he was. The sound of police sirens began in the distance, a shrill wail cutting through the icy fog outside. Isaiah's heart pounded in his chest, his breaths short and sharp. He'd known this could happen. He'd seen it on the news, heard the whispered stories in the neighborhood, felt the fear in Evelyn's voice when she'd warned him to be careful leaving the house in days long past. But knowing was one thing, living it was another. Every instinct screamed, run, fight, yell at the blatant lie spilling from Evelyn's mouth, but he did nothing. He stood still, forcing himself to breathe, because he knew any move, any wrong word, could make it worse. Evelyn still gripped the phone, her voice sharp and commanding, as if she were the real victim here. "Yes, right now," she snapped into the receiver, her other hand clutching the counter for balance. "I need police at Hamilton and Sons immediately." "He's still here," trying to deny it, but I caught him red-handed. She glanced at Isaiah, her lips curling into a smug smile, as if she'd been waiting for this moment, as if she'd known something would happen. "Hurry!" She lowered her voice, adding a fake urgency. "He's getting aggressive." Isaiah felt blood rush to his face. Aggressive. He'd barely spoken, hadn't moved, but she'd painted a picture everyone was ready to believe. He wanted to argue, to point out the absurdity of her words, but his throat tightened. He looked down at the necklace on the floor, the gift he'd meant for Evelyn, now evidence of a crime he didn't commit. He took a shaky breath, then met Evelyn's eyes, his voice low but laced with restrained anger. "I didn't steal anything, you know that." Evelyn smirked, crossing her arms. "Oh, don't play innocent now," she said, her tone scolding like he was a naughty child. "You thought you'd get away with it, didn't you? But I know your type." She emphasized the last word, her eyes scanning his worn coat, his old shoes, as if his appearance was all the proof she needed. "You walk in here, looking around like you belong, but I'm not stupid. I see this all the time." Isaiah's face burned, the phrase, "your type," echoing in his mind like a relentless bell. He didn't need to ask what she meant. He understood too well. Anger flared inside him. He wanted to shout, to tell her how wrong she was, how her pettiness and contempt were disgusting. But the words stuck, unable to break free from his throat. The police sirens grew closer, piercing the cold fog outside, resounding in the store's stillness like an unavoidable warning. Isaiah Thompson stood there, chest tight, heart thumping in his ears, trying to stay calm as the storm loomed. He didn't move, didn't speak again. His gaze lingered on the pearl necklace, now lying alone on the floor, the gift for Evelyn, now the source of all this trouble. Evelyn Harper stood behind the counter, arms crossed, a smug smile on her lips, as if she'd just won a game Isaiah never knew he was playing. The glass door swung open with a rush of cold air, and two police officers stepped through, bringing tension like a live current. Leading was Sergeant Richard Malone, an older white man with gray hair and a stern build, his badge glinting under the chandelier. Behind him was James Carter, a younger officer, sharp-eyed, but with a hint of hesitation as he scanned the room. The space fell silent instantly, every gaze shifting from Isaiah to the officers, as if all were awaiting a drama about to unfold. "There he is," Evelyn shouted, pointing at Isaiah like he was a wanted man on a reward poster. "That's him. He just tried to steal from me." Before Isaiah could react, Malone advanced, his right hand already on his handcuffs, his expression unwavering. "Sir, I need you to put your hands up where I can see them," Malone said, his voice even but authoritative, as if he'd decided everything the moment he walked in. Isaiah felt his breath catch, his fingers twitching in his coat pockets, but he didn't move. Every instinct screamed, run, shout, defend his honor, but he forced himself to stay still. He knew too well the cost of resisting in moments like this. "I didn't do anything," he said, his voice raspy but steadier than he felt. Evelyn let out a dramatic scoff. "You're going to stand there and deny it when I caught you." She flung her hand toward the necklace on the floor. "You tried to pocket it. Unbelievable. People like you." Isaiah flinched at people like you again, a stab at his dignity. James Carter, the younger officer, glanced between Isaiah, Evelyn and the necklace on the floor. Isaiah caught a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Carter wasn't as convinced as Malone, but it didn't matter. Malone took another step, gripping the cuffs tightly, his face showing no hesitation. "Sir, I need you to step outside," he said, his voice harder, like an order beyond negotiation. Isaiah's mind spun, worst-case scenarios flashing through. Pinned to the ground, cuffed in front of a crowd, a headline reading, "Elderly Black Man Arrested for Suspected Theft." He knew how these stories often ended, especially for someone like him. In a place like Crestwood, the sirens outside had stopped, replaced by footsteps and murmurs from a growing crowd at the storefront, phones raised to film through the glass. The pressure bore down, but he forced himself to breathe slowly, keeping his voice calm. "Call my son," he said, his voice cutting clearly through the tense air. Malone smirked, shaking his head. "Buddy, you can make calls at the station," he said, his tone implying it was obvious. "No," Isaiah shot back, his voice now firmer, ringing through the store. "Call my son right now." Evelyn glared at him, her eyes flashing with mockery. "Oh sure, call your son," she said, her voice lilting with sarcasm. "Who's he?" Some cheap lawyer, an activist. What's he going to do? Scream for justice? She laughed dryly, humorless, as if the idea was too ridiculous to consider. Isaiah ignored her. He slowly pulled his phone from his pocket. Not fast, not sudden, just enough to show he wasn't a threat. His trembling hands dialed, eyes locked on Malone. "Nathan, I need you at Hamilton and Sons right now," he said, into the phone, his voice calm, but carrying a weight even Evelyn couldn't dismiss. Malone frowned, a flicker of confusion crossing his face, but he didn't back off. Carter, though, paused, as if sensing something in Isaiah's tone. Not pleading, not panic, but expectation, like he knew what was coming. Time stretched endlessly, each second in the store heavy with tension. Evelyn tapped her foot on the floor, her impatience no longer hidden. Malone sighed, still gripping the cuffs, but his hold seemed looser. Carter glanced at his watch, then back at Isaiah, his eyes wavering between doubt and curiosity. The customers around stepped back, whispering to each other, some discreetly pulling out phones to record. Isaiah stood there, his breathing steadying, though his chest remained tight. He wasn't afraid, not exactly. He was waiting, and he knew Nathan wouldn't let him down. The glass door swung open, bringing a sharp gust of cold from the fog outside, but inside, the air suddenly grew more stifling than ever. A tall man stepped in, exuding authority in a crisp black suit, his polished leather shoes clicking evenly on the cold tile. Behind him were two agents in black, earpieces in place, clearly FBI. Isaiah lifted his head, his aging eyes sparking with a faint hope amid the storm of suspicion and pressure surrounding him. The man stopped in the middle of the store, his sharp gaze sweeping the space, then spoke in a low, resonant voice like steel. "I'm Nathan Thompson, Regional FBI Director for Virginia, and that," he pointed straight at Isaiah, "is my father." The store fell into a deathly silence, as if all sound had been sucked out. Sergeant Richard Malone froze, his hand on the cuffs trembling slightly, his stern demeanor now faltering. James Carter, the younger officer, exhaled sharply, his eyes widening, as he looked from Isaiah to Nathan, as if recalculating the entire situation. But the most dramatic reaction came from Evelyn Harper. The smug smile on her lips vanished in an instant, replaced by a mix of panic and anger. She blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing, as if unable to believe what she'd heard, as if refusing to accept that the older black man she'd accused was the father of someone so powerful. Nathan didn't give anyone a chance to speak first. He strode forward, his shoes clicking with authority, his eyes locked on Malone. "Sergeant," he said, his voice even but laced with danger, "I assume you have a damn good reason to explain why my father is standing here, surrounded, while you're about to cuff him, without asking a single question." Malone stiffened, his jaw clenching, his hand slowly lowering, but still not releasing the cuffs. We got a call about a theft," he said, his voice tight and defensive. "We followed procedure." Nathan tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "Procedure?" he repeated, his tone icy. "You mean walking in here, seeing an older black man, and assuming he's guilty without evidence?" Malone flushed, but didn't reply. Nathan didn't stop. He turned to Evelyn, his gaze cutting like a blade. "And you," he said, his voice dropping lower, "called the police, screaming that my father's a thief. Are you sure of what you saw?" Evelyn stammered, her hands shaking as she pointed at Isaiah. I called because he tried to steal," she shouted, her voice high with panic. "He dropped the necklace and was obviously going to pocket it. I stopped him just in time and did what any citizen would, called the cops, before he ran off." Nathan exhaled slowly, his eyes shifting to Isaiah for the first time since entering. Isaiah said nothing, didn't move, but his eyes told it all, the restrained anger, the exhaustion, and the trust that Nathan would stand up for him. Nathan looked back at Malone. "Have you checked the security footage?" he asked, his voice sharp. Malone hesitated. "We were going to," he started, but Nathan cut him off instantly. "No, you weren't," he said, his voice smooth but commanding. "You were going to cuff my father without looking at evidence, without asking him a question, without doing your job." Carter swallowed hard, his eyes flickering between Malone and Nathan, his hesitation now plain. "We should check the footage," Carter said, his voice cautious but tinged with regret. "To be sure." Malone shot Carter a look like it was betrayal, but he couldn't argue. Not now, not in front of the regional FBI head. He exhaled sharply through his nose, jaw tight. "Fine," he growled. Evelyn, meanwhile, nearly lost it. "What? No," she yelled, flailing her arms toward Nathan and Isaiah. "I told you what I saw. You're seriously going to listen to him? You see how he is, the way he acted." Nathan finally turned fully to Evelyn, his gaze silencing her instantly. Her smugness melted under that cold stare, as if she realized the power she thought she had was slipping away. "Miss Harper," Nathan said, his voice calm but cutting like steel, "let me make one thing clear to you." He stepped closer, each word a hammer blow. "You're standing in front of a man who came into this store to buy a necklace for his late wife. A man who saved every penny to be here, supporting your business. But you decided from the start he didn't belong, that he was a thief, just because of how you saw him." Nathan's words hung like a bomb in the quiet space, heavy and sharp. They hit Evelyn like an unexpected slap. "So I hope, for your sake, that the security footage shows exactly the story you just told," he continued, his lips pressing into a tight, threatening line. "Because if it doesn't, you'll answer for every word you've said." Evelyn swallowed hard, her once proud confidence cracking. Malone cleared his throat, clearly uneasy, his eyes flickering with worry. "We'll check the footage," he said, his voice strained, no longer as firm as before. The store manager, who'd been silent in the corner until now, rushed behind the counter to pull up the recording. The small screen behind the counter played the security footage, and the truth unfolded clearly. Isaiah Thompson didn't steal, didn't do anything but accidentally drop the pearl necklace due to his trembling aged hands. The store sank into a stifling silence, so quiet you could almost hear people breathing. Nathan Thompson stood there, his sharp gaze unwavering, a blade cutting through the room, shifting from Sergeant Richard Malone to Evelyn Harper. He didn't need to say more, just waited for their reaction to the undeniable truth on the screen. Malone cleared his throat, his stern demeanor now visibly shaken. He let the cuffs drop lightly to his side, then looked at Nathan with reluctance. "I think we're done here," he said, his voice tight but trying to sound professional. James Carter, the younger officer, stepped closer to Isaiah, dipping his head slightly. "I'm sorry, sir," he said quietly, his voice sincere but heavy with regret. "We should have checked better." Isaiah nodded faintly, but didn't reply. He had no energy to speak to Carter now. Nathan wasn't letting it go that easily. He stepped closer to Malone, his voice cold but commanding. "No apology, Sergeant?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. Malone clenched his jaw but said nothing, his gaze shifting away as if avoiding the truth. Nathan turned to Evelyn, who now stood frozen behind the counter, her face pale, her hands trembling as they gripped the wooden edge. "And you," he said, his voice dropping with menace, "what do you have to say about your certainty now?" He pointed at the screen, where the footage had just replayed Isaiah's innocence. Evelyn opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. She stammered, her eyes darting from Nathan to Isaiah, then to the crowd of customers, now watching her with unease and curiosity. She had no defense, no words to prop up against the obvious truth. Nathan took another step, his voice calm but cutting like a knife. "You called the police, accused my father of theft, put him in this position because of your prejudice. If there'd been no camera, if I hadn't shown up, what would have happened to him? Did you think about that?" Evelyn swallowed hard, her lips trembling, but no sound came out. Isaiah, silent until now, finally stepped forward. He looked straight at Evelyn, his aging eyes burning with restrained anger and years of weariness. His voice was raspy but clear, ringing through the quiet space. "I came here to buy a necklace for my wife. who's been gone nearly 10 years. I saved every penny to walk into this store, but you turned me into a thief in everyone's eyes for no reason. You knew I didn't do anything wrong, but you chose to do this anyway." His words landed like a hammer, not loud, not shouted, but heavy enough that Evelyn couldn't lift her head. He paused, took a deep breath, then continued, "I don't need your apology. I just want you to know that what you did today isn't just a mistake. It's what me and people like me have faced our whole lives." He turned to Nathan, his gaze softening slightly. "Let's go, son. We don't need to stay here anymore." Nathan nodded, placing a hand on his father's shoulder, a gesture both protective and comforting. But before leaving, he turned back to Evelyn and Malone one last time. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low but thick with threat. "I'll make sure this gets investigated thoroughly, not just here, but in your force, Sergeant. And you, Miss Harper, should brace yourself for the consequences you've brought on." He nodded to the two agents behind him, signaling them to document everything, then led Isaiah out. As Isaiah stepped through the glass door, he glanced back at Evelyn one final time. "All I wanted was to buy a necklace," he said, his voice calm but weighty. "But I guess today I got something more valuable, the truth about people like you." His words hung in the air, leaving Evelyn standing there, motionless, her face ashen as if she'd lost something she once thought untouchable. Outside, Crestwood's frigid air filled Isaiah's lungs as the door closed behind him. The crowd at the storefront, now larger, phones raised to record, offered scattered applause, but Isaiah didn't feel victorious. He felt tired, a deep exhaustion he'd carried through years of facing moments like this. Nathan walked beside him, his gaze still sharp, but his voice softened as he spoke to his father. "I'll handle this, Dad. They won't get away with it." Days after the incident at Hamilton and Sons, Crestwood was no longer the quiet town it appeared to be. News of what happened to Isaiah Thompson spread like wildfire, from whispers at the farmer's market to headlines in the local paper and angry posts online. Hamilton and Sons became a focal point, but not in the way they'd hoped. Their Yelp page flooded with one-star reviews, comments like blatant racism, and never stepping foot here again. Evelyn Harper was suspended indefinitely without pay, though town rumors said she'd actually been fired. A formal statement from the company came out, condemning racism and promising an internal review, but no one in Crestwood bought it as genuine, just a late attempt to save face. Sergeant Richard Malone didn't escape the storm either. Bodycam footage, released after Nathan Thompson's intervention, showed him ready to cuff Isaiah without questioning or checking evidence. An internal investigation opened, and Malone was suspended pending results. James Carter, the younger officer, posted a public apology on the Crestwood Police's social media, admitting he should have acted differently. It got hundreds of likes, but plenty of comments called it too little, too late. Nathan, as regional FBI director for Virginia, didn't let it fade. He ordered a federal investigation into racial profiling incidents in Crestwood's police force, making his father's story part of a bigger push. Reporters from across the state descended, interviewing residents, digging up similar stories Black townsfolk had endured but never spoken of. Crestwood, once proud of its peaceful facade, now had its cracks exposed, cracks Isaiah had always known were real. In his small house at the end of Maple Street, Isaiah sat alone in his worn armchair in the living room, dim light from a table lamp casting shadows on his face. Before him was the pearl necklace, the gift Nathan had gone back to Hamilton and Sons to buy for him after the ordeal, ensuring his father's original intent wasn't lost. He set it beside his wedding photo with Evelyn, the pearls glinting next to her radiant smile, in a simple white dress. He looked at it, his hand brushing the frame, and whispered, "I brought it home for you, Eve." But the joy he'd once imagined holding that gift was gone. He replayed what happened. Evelyn's suspicious stare, the wail of sirens, the helplessness of standing amid baseless accusations. He thought of the past, being chased out of stores as a young man for his skin color. Evelyn's warnings to keep your head cool, Isaiah, 'cause they won't give you a second chance. He thought of Nathan, his pride, who'd risen past barriers he couldn't, yet still fought the same fight he'd faced all his life. He sighed, a heavy breath, and wondered if anything had truly changed. He turned on the TV, the screen showing a news report about the incident. A reporter stood outside Hamilton and Sons, talking about community outrage and calls for justice. Isaiah switched it off, not wanting to hear more. He should feel victorious, should feel he'd proven something, but all he felt was fatigue. I shouldn't have to prove anything in the first place, he muttered, echoing what Nathan had said as they left the store that day. But the bitter truth remained. If Nathan weren't who he was, if there'd been no camera, if he were just an ordinary older black man, his story might have ended very differently. A knock at the door broke his drifting thoughts. He stood, his aging legs moving slowly to open it. Outside stood Nathan, still in his black suit, but this time with an 8-year-old boy beside him. Jeremiah, Isaiah's grandson. "Thought you could use some family time," Nathan said, offering a gentle smile, then stepping back to let the boy in. Jeremiah rushed forward, small arms wrapping around his grandfather, his face lit with a bright grin. "Grandpa, I heard you shut those bad guys up." The boy's innocent words drew a smile from Isaiah, the first in days. He ruffled the kid's hair, his warm voice breaking through. "Just another day for me, son." Nathan followed inside, resting a hand on his father's shoulder. "I told the team to expedite the investigation," he said, his gaze steady. "They won't get away with it, Dad." Isaiah just nodded, but his eyes remained distant, as if fixed on a far-off place where long nights and hard memories still lingered. Isaiah settled back into his worn armchair in the living room, the dim lamplight highlighting the deep lines on his face, marks of years gone by. Before him, Jeremiah played with an old wooden box Isaiah had once used to store toys for Nathan as a kid. The boy giggled, holding up a small wooden horse. "Grandpa, was this Dad's?" Isaiah looked at the horse, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "Sure was, Jeremiah. Your dad loved playing with it," he replied, his voice raspy but warm, as if memories of old days stirred, cutting through the layered exhaustion in his heart. Nathan Thompson leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, his sharp gaze softening as he watched his father and son. He'd just shed his suit jacket, revealing a crisp white shirt, a sign of a long day with the FBI, but now he was just a son, a father. "I told Cynthia to prep a press release," Nathan said, his voice low but firm. "There'll be a full investigation into what happened at Hamilton and Sons, and how Crestwood police handle cases like this. I want the world to know what they did to you." Isaiah looked at his son, a flicker of pride in his eyes, but mixed with a heaviness. "You really going to make this a big deal?" he asked, his voice slow. Nathan nodded, stepping into the room and sitting across from his father. "I can't let this slide, Dad. Not after what they put you through, and how many others we never hear about. I won't let them forget." Jeremiah looked up from the wooden box, curious about his dad and grandpa, but stayed quiet, as if sensing the weight in the air. Isaiah sighed, his hand brushing the wedding photo with Evelyn, set beside the pearl necklace Nathan had retrieved. He looked at the gleaming pearls, then at Jeremiah, the boy with bright eyes and a carefree smile, a new generation he hoped wouldn't face what he had. "Son," he said, his voice lowering, "I know you'll fight. You've always been stronger than me at that. But sometimes I wonder if all these battles really change anything." Nathan leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "It will change, Dad. Not right away, not completely, but every time we stand up, we make them think twice. You didn't let them define you that day, and I'll make sure they never forget it." He rested a hand on Jeremiah, pulling the boy close. "I'm doing this for you, and for Jeremiah too. I want him to grow up in a better world." Isaiah looked at his grandson, then his son, and a bit of warmth crept into his heart. He stood, slowly walking to the small mantel, picking up the pearl necklace. He didn't wear it, didn't box it, he just held it for a moment, then set it back beside Evelyn's photo. "I'll keep it here," he said, his voice soft. "Not to wear, but to remember. Remember your mom, and that we got through that day." He turned to Nathan. "You're right, Nathan. We can't stop. But I'm old, son. From now on it's your fight." Nathan gave a small smile, nodding. "I'll carry it, Dad, I promise." Jeremiah piped up, hugging his grandfather's leg. "Grandpa's a hero, right?" he asked, eyes shining. Isaiah chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Not quite, Jeremiah, just a guy trying to do right." The story of Isaiah Thompson in White Woman Calls Cop on Black Old Man, Speechless, when his son arrives, and he's the FBI chief, mirrors real issues in American society today, especially racial profiling and injustice in everyday encounters. In Crestwood, Virginia, Isaiah, an elderly black man, just wanted to buy a pearl necklace to honor his late wife, but Evelyn Harper suspected and accused him of theft without evidence. A familiar scenario for many people of color in the U.S., judged by appearance or race, like Isaiah in his worn coat. The arrival of Officer Malone, ready to cuff him without checking footage, reflects documented issues of police overreach and bias, seen in viral cases from Minneapolis to Ferguson. Nathan, Isaiah's son and FBI director, turned the tables with his authority, but it raises the question, without him, what would have happened to Isaiah? The fallout, Hamilton and Sons boycotted, Malone investigated, shows the power of public outrage and technology in seeking justice, a growing trend in America, through movements like Black Lives Matter. The takeaway is this: in real-life America, individuals must actively protect their rights and communities by documenting the truth, like the camera that saved Isaiah, and using collective voices for change, as Nathan did. Don't wait for others to stand up for you. Learn from Isaiah, holding dignity under suspicion, and from Nathan, leveraging every resource to fight. The battle against injustice doesn't end in a day, but as Isaiah said, we keep ourselves the first step to a fairer society. If you connect with Isaiah's journey and want to join us in spreading the message of justice, subscribe to the channel today. Thanks for watching this story, and see you in the next video as we keep exploring real-life lessons.